Ripped, I didn't say a word when the HOA president slammed her binder shut and accused my sister of trespassing. She was red-faced, waving her hand toward the door like she had some kind of sheriff's authority. But my sister didn't flinch. She just reached into her bag, pulled out her military ID and placed it on the table. The room went dead quiet. The lawyer's pen froze mid-note. For once, even the president shut her mouth. That was the moment. Everything shifted, not just for me, but for the entire board that had spent months trying to push me into submission. They thought they could intimidate, humiliate, and isolate me. Instead, they ended up staring at a piece of government-issued plastic that carried more weight than all their bylaws combined. But to understand how we got to that moment, I have to rewind. Because the truth is, I wasn't looking for a fight. When I moved here, I wasn't even thinking about homeowners associations or rules or politics of any kind. I had inherited a modest house from my grandfather, a simple, wood-frame place on the edge of a development that used to be farmland before someone decided to slap the word estates on it and build cookie-cutter houses. My grandfather never lived under an HOA, and technically, neither did I. His property line sat just outside the association's original charter, something he had insisted on back when developers first tried to rope him in. He didn't like the idea of neighbors telling him what color to paint his barn. I guess that stubbornness runs in the family. When I moved in, it was with the intention of living quietly. I had just gone through a rough patch in my life work. Stress, a messy breakup, the usual midlife stuff that makes you want to retreat somewhere quiet. The house wasn't fancy, but it had a porch where you could sit in the evenings and listen to crickets. It had a little patch of woods behind it where deer sometimes wandered. It had my grandfather's old workbench in the garage, still smelling faintly of sawdust. I thought honestly this was it. A place to fix things up at my own pace, maybe plant a garden and host my sister on weekends when she wasn't on duty. The first few weeks were exactly what I wanted: peaceful, quiet, restorative. My neighbors waved politely, though there was a certain stiffness I noticed in their greetings. At the time, I brushed it off. People in HOA neighborhoods often keep to themselves. I didn't realize yet that I was already being discussed in hushed tones. Not for anything I had done, but simply because I wasn't one of them. I wasn't on the HOA roster. My house didn't pay into their dues. To the board, I wasn't a neighbor. I was an outsider living in the middle of their territory, and they didn't like it. The first letter showed up on a Friday afternoon. It wasn't mailed, just taped to my front door with cheap masking tape. The tone was condescending. You are in violation of HOA policy for allowing an unauthorized vehicle to park overnight in the driveway. I stared at the notice in disbelief. The so-called unauthorized vehicle was my sister's car. She had driven down for the weekend to help me paint the kitchen. I figured it was a simple mistake, so I called the number listed at the bottom of the notice. A woman answered, curt and dismissive, and when I explained that my house wasn't part of the HOA, she cut me off. All properties within this subdivision are under HOA jurisdiction, she snapped. I reminded her of the original plat maps, how my grandfather's land predated the subdivision. She said she'd look into it and hung up. I thought that would be the end of it. But the following weekend, when my sister came back, things escalated. We were unloading groceries when two board members marched up the driveway like they owned the place. They demanded to know who she was, why she was there, and whether she had permission to stay. My sister, who has more patience than I do, explained politely that she was visiting family. Their response? Visitors must be registered through the HOA and are limited to 3 nights per month. I could tell she was trying not to laugh. She didn't need anyone's permission to visit her own brother. I cut in, reminding them again that my property wasn't under their jurisdiction. They didn't argue. They just smiled in that smug way that tells you someone's already planning their next move. Sure enough, the letters multiplied. Threats of fines. Warnings about unlawful gatherings. Even a claim that my sister's car devalued the neighborhood. It was absurd. At first I tried diplomacy. I wrote emails, I cited county land records, pointing out that my parcel was excluded from their bylaws. I even offered to meet with the board to clear up any confusion. Every attempt was either ignored or met with snide responses. Our legal counsel advises that you are in violation. Failure to comply will result in escalation. It was like arguing with a wall. A wall that enjoyed smirking at you. That was the turning point for me, not anger, but clarity. If they wanted to play legal games, I would play, only I wouldn't be sloppy or petty. I spent nights digging through county records, tracing the subdivision's creation. I found the original incorporation documents, the boundary lines, the exclusions. Sure enough, my grandfather's stubbornness was carved into the record. His property was specifically exempt. I made copies. I photographed every notice they taped to my door, saved every email, logged every time they came onto my land without permission. I wasn't yelling or making scenes. I was building a file. At the same time, my sister, ever the professional, told me to keep calm and let her know if they harassed me while she was around. She serves in the military, and while she doesn't flaunt it, she carries herself with a certain authority that makes people think twice. Still, neither of us expected what came next. The HOA called a special meeting to address what they termed ongoing violations. They hand-delivered me an invitation, more like a summons. Really, against my better judgment, I went. My sister insisted on coming along. The meeting was held in the clubhouse, with the board seated at a long table like they were holding court. I could see the satisfaction on their faces when we walked in, like they'd finally cornered me. The president wasted no time. She launched into a speech about community standards and mandatory compliance. Then she looked directly at my sister and declared that visitors exceeding 3 nights per month were trespassing, subject to removal. That was the word she used, -removal. I stayed silent, watching. My sister, however, slowly reached into her bag and pulled out her military ID. She placed it on the table with deliberate calm. The effect was immediate. The lawyer, who had been scribbling notes, froze. The president faltered mid-sentence. Everyone in the room knew what that ID represented. You don't accuse an active duty service member of trespassing on private property. Not without consequences that reach far beyond your little clubhouse. That was when I slid my folder across the table, copies of the original subdivision maps, county exemptions, and legal records showing my property had never been under HOA jurisdiction. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply said, "This is the law. And she is my sister. You have no authority here." The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd heard in months. The lawyer muttered something about needing to review the documents. The president, her face pale now, mumbled an adjournment. They couldn't get out of that room fast enough. After that meeting, the harassment stopped almost overnight. The letters ceased. The smug smiles vanished. At the next election cycle, 2 board members quietly resigned. The president stayed on a little longer, but her power was broken. People whispered about how she had gone too far. Neighbors who once avoided me started nodding again, some even apologizing in small ways. It wasn't warm friendship, but it was respect, or at least fear. As for me, life returned to what I wanted in the first place: quiet. My sister still visits when she can, and no one dares say a word about it. Sometimes when I sit on the porch and see the HOA president drive by, I notice she doesn't look over anymore. She keeps her eyes on the road, hands tight on the wheel. And that's fine with me. I don't need her approval. I don't need anyone's. All I wanted was peace. And now I have it. They thought they could control me with paper notices and threats. But they forgot the simplest truth. Authority isn't about who yells the loudest in a clubhouse. It's about who holds the deed, who holds the record, and sometimes who has a sister with an ID that freezes a room. Now, when I walk through the neighborhood, they wave or they look away. Either way, it's quiet again.